Imagine, if you will, a man made of porcelain, exquisitely crafted, his surface polished to a virtuous gleam. He walks through the world with an agonizing carefulness, terrified of the crude, jostling energies of flesh and blood. He never raises his voice, for fear the vibration might crack his hollow chest. He never makes a selfish demand, for fear the grasping motion might chip his delicate fingers. He is endlessly agreeable, endlessly accommodating, a perfect, sterile vessel of supposed goodness. He is the man who brings soup when she's sick, who listens for hours without complaint, who remembers anniversaries she's long forgotten. He is the reliable harbor in a storm of unpredictable men, and he is always, always left standing on the shore, watching her ship sail away with a pirate. He then retreats here to a room like this one, the air thick with the scent of old paper and the ghost of rain on a dusty window pane. He sits in the gloom, nursing his bewilderment like a sacred wound. He asks the shadows, "What more could I have given? I gave her everything." Ah, but you see, that's the fatal miscalculation. You didn't give her everything. You gave her a curated, edited, and heavily censored version of a man. You gave her a garden, yes, but it was a walled garden, perfectly manicured, every weed plucked, every rose pruned into submission. You were shocked, offended, when she leapt over the wall to run barefoot through a wild, untamed forest with someone who promised her nothing but the thrill of getting lost, thorns and all. There's an old, forgotten piece of folklore, whispered in the Carpathian foothills, about a village that carved a protector for itself out of the heartwood of an ancient oak. They called him the Silent Guardian. He was flawless, strong, his face a mask of serene benevolence. He stood in the town square, unblinking as seasons turned, but a strange plague fell upon the village, not of the body, but of the spirit. A listlessness, a gray melancholy. The laughter of children thinned to a whisper. Lovers' quarrels ceased, not out of peace, but out of a shared, suffocating apathy. The village elder, a woman with eyes like cracked earth, finally understood. The guardian couldn't bleed. He couldn't rage at injustice. He couldn't weep with heartbreak. He couldn't roar with possessive, irrational jealousy. He was pure, and in his purity, he was inhuman. He was a vacuum. By protecting them from all harm, he was starving them of all life. To save themselves, they had to take an axe to the very saint they had created. And in the splintering of that perfect, silent wood, they heard the first vital, ragged screams of life returning. You, my good man, are that wooden saint. You have mistaken your fear for virtue. Your restraint is not nobility. It is a terror of your own shadow. Nietzsche saw this coming, you know. He diagnosed your condition over a century ago. He spoke of the last man, the man who seeks only comfort and security, who has left the regions where it was hard to live, for one needs warmth. The last man blinks. He finds no meaning in chaos, no beauty in destruction, no art in pain. He is nice. And what is nice? It is a neutered word, a domestic word. You don't call a hurricane nice. You don't call a wolf nice. You don't call the abyss that stares back at you nice. You have spent your life trying to be an adjective that belongs on a throw pillow. Love is not a transaction of niceties. It is not a balance sheet of good deeds where you make deposits of self-sacrifice and expect a withdrawal of lifelong devotion. That is a contract for a nurse or a butler. Love, the real thing, the terrifying, world-ending, soul-shattering thing. It is a pagan ritual. It demands the whole sacrifice. Not just your pleasantries and your support, but your darkness too, your selfish hunger, your magnificent rage, your capacity for beautiful, sublime destruction. She didn't want a savior to pull her from the fire. She wanted someone who was not afraid to burn with her. She wanted a man who had wrestled with his own demons and wore the scars to prove it, not one who pretended they didn't exist. She wanted a conversation, not a sermon, a storm, not a still pond. A recent analysis whispered through the cold, glowing screens of 2024 confirmed this ancient, inconvenient truth in the language of data. Attraction often correlates not with agreeableness, but with a certain kind of unapologetic presence, a willingness to occupy space, to have sharp edges, to be formidable. Not cruel, mind you. That's the refuge of the weak, but formidable. A force that commands respect because it respects itself enough not to apologize for its own existence. Your goodness became a cage for you and for her. Every selfless act was another bar on the window. Every time you swallowed your anger, you thickened the walls. You created a perfect, safe, respectable prison of love. And then were baffled when she tunneled her way out in the middle of the night. She didn't want a warden, however benevolent. She wanted a co-conspirator. You are left behind not because you are good, but because your goodness is a shield. It is a refusal to engage with the glorious, grotesque, contradictory chaos of what it means to be a complete human being. You offered her a perfectly polished mirror, and she yearned to see the cracks. You offered her predictable daylight, and her soul was nocturnal. So here's the question I will leave with you tonight. As the candle burns low and the shadows in this room grow teeth, look down at your own hands, the ones that have only ever offered, never taken, the ones that have only ever soothed, never gripped. Tell me, what is the real difference between a saint and a coward if both are ultimately defined by what they refuse to do? You don't fall in love with a person, you fall in love with the echo of your own loneliness. Do you want to know a truly filthy secret? One that, if you confess it aloud, curdles the air around you and makes even the most devoted romantic look at you with a flicker of panicked recognition. Here it is. You were never in love with her. Not really. You were in love with a ghost you painted onto her skin. A phantom you constructed from the spare parts of your own unmet needs, your unfulfilled archetypes, your desperate, howling solitude. She was simply the first warm body that stood still long enough for the projection to stick. Think of your heart not as a cozy hearth, but as a vast, empty ballroom. Cold marble floors, ceilings draped in cobwebs, moonlight spilling like powdered bone through towering, grime-streaked windows. For years, you wander this ballroom alone. Every footstep you take, every whispered word, every sigh of despair, it doesn't just happen, it echoes. It bounces off the distant walls, returning to you warped and amplified. After a while, you grow accustomed to these sounds. You mistake the echo of your own voice for the presence of another. Then, one day, someone wanders in. She stands by the door, a silhouette against the light. And when you call out, "Hello?" the echo that comes back is different. It's been filtered through her. It has a new timbre, a new resonance. It sounds beautiful, hopeful. And you, in your profound isolation, do not think, an interesting acoustic phenomenon. No, you think, I have found my soulmate. You are not having a conversation with her. You are having a conversation with yourself, mediated through her. You praise her wisdom when she simply parrots back a half-baked philosophy you fed her a week before. You marvel at her unique taste in music when it is merely a reflection of the playlists you so carefully curated for her. You adore her strength when she is merely enduring the impossible standards you've set for your shared fantasy. The old Greek myth of Narcissus is so tragically misunderstood. We paint him as a vain fool, a preening egotist. How boring, how pedestrian. The real horror of Narcissus is not that he fell in love with himself, but that he was so starved of authentic reflection, so utterly alone in the cosmos, that the first image to ever truly meet his gaze, even if it was his own, was an irresistible relief. He wasn't in love with his face. He was in love with the miracle of being seen at all. He was the first victim of the echo chamber. You are his modern disciple. You turn her into a beautiful, living mirror, and you spend your days polishing the glass, terrified that she might one day turn around and show you her back. Kierkegaard would diagnose this as a form of despair, the despair of not willing to be oneself. The silence of your own cavernous soul is so terrifying that you must furnish it with an effigy of love. She is not a person. She is a piece of existential furniture, a beautiful distraction from the abyss. You think you are an artist of love, but you are a taxidermist. You found a wild, magnificent creature, and the moment you decided you must have it, possess it, you began the grim work. You didn't mean to, of course. Your intentions were good, but you slowly, carefully replaced her blood with embalming fluid, her will with your expectations, her messy, unpredictable guts with sterile cotton batting. You stitched her up so perfectly, propped her in a lifelike pose, and placed perfectly clear glass eyes in her head. And then you stood back and admired your work, swelling with pride. How beautiful she is, you thought. How perfectly she complements the room. You loved her stillness. You loved that she would never run away. And you were devastated when the first gust of wind from the real world blew through and revealed the scent of formaldehyde. You were shocked when the illusion shattered, when you saw the stitches, when you realized you weren't holding a living, breathing partner, but a hollow trophy. Your relationship wasn't a dance between two sovereign beings. It was a puppet show where you, sweating under the stage lights, were frantically trying to work both sets of strings. The German romantics had a word for this: the doppelganger, the spectral double. You didn't seek a partner, you sought your own ghost, hoping that if you could love it, you could finally love yourself. You projected onto her all the qualities you wished you had: the grace, the courage, the untroubled spirit. She became the repository for your idealized self. The problem, of course, is that no living person can bear the weight of being someone else's phantom limb. Eventually, they have to amputate. It is not an act of cruelty, it is an act of survival. This is the great, painful liberation that comes when you stop chasing. You are finally forced to turn away from the mirror, to shatter it. You are forced to stand in the terrifying, silent, empty ballroom of your own heart and listen, not to the echoes, but to the silence itself, to the sound of your own blood in your ears, to the slow, steady rhythm of a heart that beats for no one but itself. It is the loneliest and most sacred moment of a man's life. So I will leave you with a riddle for your long night's vigil, a question to peel back the layers of your romantic history. Think of the one you believe you loved the most. Now strip it all away. In your mind, erase her laugh, erase her ambitions, erase her kindness. Erase every memory, every shared joke, every trait you listed to your friends. Be left with nothing but the raw, silent, irreducible fact of her otherness, her existence as a consciousness completely separate from your own, with a universe inside her that you can never ever fully know. Now, is that silence between you a comfort or is it a terror? The man who fears no cage will never be offered a key. Let me tell you about the freest man I ever knew, or at least, the man who believed himself to be the freest. He was a phantom in a leather jacket, a connoisseur of departure lounges, and the 3 a.m. glow of neon signs on empty highways. He never owned more than he could carry. His relationships had the life expectancy of a mayfly. He called it living authentically. He called it resisting domestication. He spoke of commitment as if it were a quaint provincial disease one caught from drinking tap water. He was charming, of course. Men like this always are. Their charm is their camouflage, their passport. It allows them to plunder the warmth and intimacy of a woman's world. Her bed, her trust, her quiet Sunday mornings, and then vanish before the bill for emotional investment comes due. He saw himself as a wolf, a lone wanderer of the steppes, too noble for the sheep pen of monogamy, a beautiful romantic image he'd polished until it shone. What he really was a ghost haunting the edges of other people's lives. He could pass through the walls of their homes, sample the feast on their table, listen to their laughter, and then dissipate into the night, leaving behind nothing but a faint chill in the air and the lingering question, was he ever really here? His freedom was the freedom of a specter, absolute and absolutely meaningless. He could touch nothing because nothing could hold him. There's a strange little fable they tell in the windswept islands off the coast of nowhere about a bird born without feet. A mythical creature called the Apis. It was condemned to an existence of perpetual flight. It hatched in the air, lived in the air, and died in the air, its body falling unseen into the sea. The other birds, the ones in nests and on branches, watched it with a kind of reverent envy. They saw its effortless glide, its mastery of the boundless sky, and they chirped songs about its glorious liberty. But the Apis, so the legend goes, spent its entire life with a single secret agony. It would have traded all the heavens for 1 square inch of solid ground, for the feeling of a branch between its claws, for a perch, for a home. Our man in the leather jacket was the Apis in human form. He preached the gospel of the open sky while secretly craving the cage. Not a prison, mind you, but a structure. A place of belonging so strong he could finally stop flying. This is the savage paradox that Nietzsche understood and that modern men have forgotten. The Übermensch, the overman, is not the one who floats above all responsibility. That is not strength. That is weightlessness. That is nihilism. No, the true overman is the one who can bear the heaviest weight, the one who can forge his own values and then bind himself to them with chains of his own making. Commitment, to Nietzsche, wasn't a weakness. It was the ultimate expression of a powerful will. It is the act of saying, here I will build my world, here I will make my stand. The man who flees from every cage is not a lion, he is a rabbit, terrified of every shadow, every rustle in the grass. His freedom is just a prettier word for his fear. Fear of being known, fear of being tested, fear of being seen in the unflattering morning light without his leather jacket and his well-rehearsed charm. Fear that if he ever stood still, he would discover he has no center. We see this pathology in its most distilled form in the digital meat market of our age. The endless swipe, the paradox of choice, as the academics with their clipboards dryly call it. They've published studies, little papers in 2023 and 2025 that confirm what the poets have always known. Infinite choice doesn't lead to satisfaction, it leads to paralysis, to a low-grade, persistent anxiety. The man scrolling through 1,000 smiling faces is not a powerful sultan in a harem. He is a starving man at an infinite buffet, so overwhelmed by the possibility of a better meal just around the corner that he walks the aisles for hours, his plate remaining empty, until the banquet hall closes and he is left alone with his hunger. He kept his options open, a wonderfully noble-sounding phrase. What it really means is he lived his life in a hallway, a long, featureless corridor with 1,000 doors. He'd pause at each one, admire the craftsmanship, maybe even put his ear to the wood to listen to the life happening inside. But he never, ever turned the knob. Because to choose one room is to forsake all the others. And that choice, that sacrifice, was a burden his freedom could not bear. He never learned the secret. The warmth is not in the hallway. The life is not in the potential. It's inside the room. Any room. Love, real love, is a forge. It requires you to submit yourself to the fire, to be held, heated, hammered, to have your impurities burned away, to be reshaped into something stronger, something more useful. The man who fears the forge will forever remain a lump of soft, unrefined iron. He keeps his shape, yes. He is not scarred. But he will never become a sword. He will never become a plowshare. He will never be anything more than raw, useless potential. He thinks he is protecting his heart, but he is condemning it to irrelevance. A heart that is never risked, never broken, never offered up as collateral for a foolish and beautiful promise, is not a heart at all. It is a museum piece, preserved in a jar of cynical fluid, waiting for a day that will never come. That which you try to destroy in yourself is the very ore from which your most precious gold is forged. We are told a story, aren't we? A relentless saccharine narrative woven by greeting cards and Hollywood endings, that the path to happiness lies in constant self-improvement, that our flaws are blemishes to be scrubbed away, our darkness a stain to be bleached, our contradictions inconvenient truths to be ironed flat. We are urged to become better versions of ourselves, smoother, kinder, more palatable. We are sold the lie that wholeness lies in seamless perfection. What utter, beautiful nonsense. Imagine a landscape sculpted only of smooth, rounded hills, no jagged peaks to pierce the sky, no deep valleys to hold shadow, no treacherous ravines to test your footing. Beautiful, perhaps, in a bland, forgettable way, but it would lack all drama, all texture, all the raw, untamed beauty that makes a landscape truly unforgettable. You, my friend, are not meant to be a carefully manicured lawn. You are a wild forest, a tangled ecosystem of light and shadow, of blooming flowers and decaying leaves, of predators and prey. To try and prune yourself into perpetual pleasantness is to destroy the very source of your vitality. Think of the alchemists of old. They sought to turn lead into gold, but they understood a fundamental principle. The gold was already within the lead. It wasn't about obliterating the base metal. It was about subjecting it to intense heat, to corrosive acids, to the crucible of transformation. It was about embracing the darkness, the impurity, the very essence of what they sought to transcend. The ash was not the enemy. It was the necessary byproduct of the process. You have spent so much of your life running from your own ash, from your anger, your jealousy, your fear, your petty resentments, your capacity for cruelty. You have labeled these parts of yourself as bad, toxic, unacceptable, and desperately tried to bury them alive. But what you bury doesn't die. It festers. It whispers in the dark corners of your mind. And when it finally claws its way to the surface, it does so in grotesque, distorted forms, precisely because it has been denied the light. Nietzsche, with his love of harsh truths, would tell you that your demons are not weaknesses to be eradicated. They are the raw material of your strength. The very intensity of your rage, if harnessed, can become the fire that forges your will. Your jealousy, twisted and ugly as it feels, speaks to the depth of your desire, the things you truly value. Your fear, if faced, reveals the contours of your courage. Consider the great tragic heroes of literature and myth. Achilles was defined by his rage, Hamlet by his paralyzing grief and indecision, Medea by her vengeful fury. These are not flawless paragons of virtue. They are deeply flawed, contradictory beings, and it is precisely in their imperfections, in their willingness to grapple with their inner darkness, that their humanity and their enduring power lies. Would we remember a Hamlet who politely moved on after his father's murder? Would Achilles inspire awe if he simply shrugged off the insult to his honor? Modern psychology, even in its clinical language, is beginning to echo this ancient wisdom. Studies in resilience, particularly those emerging in the wake of the turbulent years of 2023, 2025, are revealing that true strength is not the absence of adversity or negative emotions, but the capacity to navigate them, to integrate them into a larger sense of self. The men who emerge from the fire stronger are not those who were never burned, but those who learn to understand the nature of the flames. You see a flash of anger within yourself, and you immediately try to suppress it, to replace it with a forced smile. You feel a pang of jealousy, and you shame yourself for your immaturity. You experience fear, and you label yourself weak. You are constantly at war with yourself, trying to excise the parts you deem unacceptable. And in this internal conflict, you bleed your energy, you diminish your authenticity, and you cripple your capacity for genuine connection. For how can you truly connect with another human being when you are presenting a carefully curated facade, terrified of revealing the messy, contradictory truth of who you are? How can you offer true intimacy when you are constantly censoring your own inner landscape? You are offering a performance, not a person, and eventually the audience will sense the artifice. The fleeting moments of hope in this brutal truth lie in the possibility of integration, of accepting that you are not a single unified entity, but a complex tapestry woven from light and shadow. Your darkness is not a void to be filled with light. It is the rich, fertile soil from which your most vibrant growth springs. The bitter sarcasm here is aimed at the self-help gurus and the purveyors of instant enlightenment who promise a painless path to perfection. They are selling you a fantasy of wholeness that requires the lobotomization of your own soul. True wholeness is not the absence of cracks. It is the acceptance that the light shines through the cracks. It is the ability to hold your darkness and your light in equal measure, without judgment, without shame. So, I have a question for you, whispered into the flickering candlelight of your own self-examination. A question that might feel like a blade turning in an old wound. What if the qualities you hate most about yourself are not flaws to be eradicated, but untamed energies waiting to be alchemized? What if your anger, properly understood and channeled, is the fire of your conviction? What if your jealousy is the ghost of a desire that still burns within you? What if your fear is simply the compass pointing you towards the things that truly matter? Are you brave enough to stop running from your own shadows and instead learn to dance with them? So to you, the eternal wanderer, the man proud of his emotional passport with no stamps in it, the ghost who haunts the periphery of joy. I have a challenge for you. No, a dare. Go on, build something. Not a cage, but a fortress, a relationship, a vow, a promise that costs you something. Choose a single door in that endless hallway and walk through it. Lock it from the inside. See if the walls you build to protect another person don't, in the end, become the very thing that finally gives you a place to stand. Or are you perhaps terrified to discover you have nothing inside worth defending? You only become worthy of a kingdom for two when you have learned to rule a kingdom of one. Picture a man. He has been walking for an eternity. The sun, a merciless white coin in a bleached sky, has baked the world into a single, cracked canvas of ochre and sand. This is the desert of the self. This is where you arrive when all the chasing has stopped, when the echoes have faded, when the cages have rusted, when the ash of your former self settles at your feet. There are no distractions here, no smiling phantoms to project upon, no easy escapes, no applause. There is only the grit in your teeth, the burn in your throat, and the deafening silence of your own heartbeat. For years you feared this place. You saw solitude as a failure, a punishment, the waiting room of the unwanted. You did everything in your power to avoid its stillness. You filled your life with noise, with ambition, with the endless frantic pursuit of another's validation, all to drown out the whisper of the wind across these dunes. But the universe, in its brutal and elegant wisdom, knew this was the only cure. You spent your life seeking a better half, a phrase that is itself a confession of inadequacy. You were begging for someone to save you from the terror of your own company. And the cosmos answered your prayer, not by giving you what you wanted, but by giving you precisely what you needed, an overdose of yourself. It led you, kicking and screaming, right here. There is an ancient apocryphal tale of a prince who would be king. On the eve of his coronation, the kingdom's law required him to perform a final trial. He was not to slay a dragon or lead an army. He was to walk into the great salt flat, the place they called the world's mirror, and remain there for 40 days and 40 nights. He was allowed no food, no companions, no shelter. His only permitted provision was a small silver mirror. The law was simple. He could only return and claim his throne when he no longer felt the need to look at his own reflection. For the first week, the prince was consumed by it. He checked his face for sun-scald. He watched his own lips crack. He performed speeches to his own image, practicing the gravitas of a king. The mirror was his only companion, the echo of his own vanity in the vast emptiness. By the third week, his performance had exhausted him. His face was a gaunt mask. He began to see not a prince, but a fool, posturing for an audience of one. He grew to hate the mirror. He railed at it, cursed it, saw in it the face of his own pathetic need. Sometime in the final days, something shifted. The hatred abated, replaced by a profound indifference. The sun, the wind, the silence, they were no longer things to be endured, but simply things that were. He was no longer a prince waiting to become a king. He was just a man, a speck of consciousness in an infinite, unjudging void. On the final morning, as he prepared to leave, he saw the silver mirror half buried in the salt. He felt no compulsion to pick it up. He had forgotten it was even there. He had learned to exist without reflection. He was ready to rule. This is the final, savage truth. The liberation that comes when men stop chasing what destroys them is not the triumphant acquisition of the prize. It is the shedding of the desire for it. It is the coronation that happens in absolute solitude. It is Nietzsche's amor fati, the love of one's fate, in its purest form. You learn to love the desert. You learn that your loneliness is not a wound, but a throne of bone and dust, yes, but a throne nonetheless, from which you can survey the vast, empty kingdom of your soul and find it, for the first time, complete. The man who walks out of this desert is not the same man who entered. He has been burned down to his essence. The pleasing lies have evaporated. The desperate need for a soft place to land has been scoured away by the abrasive wind. He smells of sun and stone, not of neediness. He walks with the terrible, quiet grace of a man who has faced the abyss within himself and did not blink. And here is the ultimate paradox, the punchline to the grand cosmic joke. This man, this king of a desolate empire, the one who no longer needs another to feel whole, is the only man who is truly ready for love. Because his love is no longer the grasping of a beggar, but the offering of a sovereign. He does not seek a woman to complete him, to validate him, to be the mirror for his ego. He seeks a fellow sovereign, another ruler of another kingdom with whom he can form an alliance. A union not of need, but of mutual, formidable strength. He has faced the saint's shadow and integrated it. He has shattered the echo chamber. He has understood the hunger of the cage and chosen his fortress. He has performed the alchemy of ash and found his gold. He has arrived. So, the final question. Not a dare, not a riddle, not an accusation. Just a quiet invitation for you and the man you are when all the lights are out and the performances are over. Have you the courage to walk into your own desert? To let the sun burn away every borrowed identity, every pleasing lie, every ghost of who you thought you should be? To face the silence not as an absence, but as a presence. To find in the heart of your own magnificent desolation a king